I'm sure that everybody remembers this Craftsman 286 that I tore apart because it had a motherboard that got corroded. In this video, which I suppose you can call part 3, we're going to rebuild it, hopefully, with another board and probably bring it closer to what it should have been. You can see there Mark-16, and on the back, if we take a look, you can see the sticker says AT16, which I take to mean an AT clone at 16 megahertz, so probably a 286 at 16 megahertz. Now here's the part where I get myself in trouble with my viewing audience. I'm about to complain about an eBay seller and misrepresentation, or at the very least, inaccurate representation, or incomplete representation. And they're probably going to tell me that, well, you should have seen this coming. And to be brutally honest, they're probably right. But I've got a pair of boards here for it's an okay price, but not great. But it was okay for what it is. As it turns out, apparently 286 boards are hard to find now, which is amazing. Now this I knew was in terrible shape and is basically useless. I knew that going into it, and you can see there that trace is completely destroyed. There's corrosion all over that. There's corrosion in that slot. This wasn't the one that I cared about. No, the one that I cared about was this one, which was marked as being unlabeled, but is actually a DFI, or Diamond Flower International, if you want to use the full name, Top 286. This one was billed as being in good condition, and as you can see, well, I don't know about that. There's definitely corrosion on this board. It's basically exactly the same way. And there's some down there for some reason. I don't really know how that happened. Just that apparently it did. This is interesting in that it does take the normal socketed DIP memory, DIP, dual inline package. These are all 256 K, I believe. I don't know how much RAM would be on this. Just doing the math in my head. There's 9 chips per row here, which means there's 18 chips per bank. Again, not 100% sure. Some of these are different. Probably indicates replacement. Although this entire row is different. But it also has these on it, which probably don't look like anything that anybody has really ever seen before. These are actually SIP sockets for the SIP memory, which is basically a SIM. You can see it says SIM right on it. But instead of using a SIM with card edge connector, it uses pins, which was something that they experimented with in the 286 era, which this is a 286 board, obviously. It is a build as being a 16 megahertz 286. Now the fact that all these chips are labeled 16 megahertz, at least these ones, seems to bear that out. There is no math coprocessor that would go here. Now, this uses the Chips and Technology's new enhanced AT chipset, or a NEAT, as it is called. Hopefully that means I'm not going to have to experiment with a set NEAT utility or anything like that, because that can be a pain. So what I'm going to do is, irrespective of all this damage, which I don't know that I can repair, I'm hoping that it's not going to be destroyed. I'm going to throw it in that case, give it a shot, and see what happens. But I'm not really expecting miracles. The pictures in the listing showed it as being in much better condition than it actually is. And someone's probably going to turn around and say, well, you should have asked for better pictures. And again, they're probably right. But that doesn't change the fact that it was listed as being in good condition. And in fact, it wasn't. So I'm feeling kind of cheated, especially since the eBay shipping service, which to my knowledge was always supposed to be import fees paid, also charged me almost half of what I paid for the damn thing in import fees in order to get it. So that was kind of dumb. Okay, jumping ahead a lot. This is what we've got. Now, this is not very ideal. because I am missing a bunch of little plastic standoffs. For some reason, there are holes punched in this case for both the XT and the AT. It's not consistent. What I should really be doing is I should be getting 2 standoffs for there. 1 standoff there. And I think there should be a plastic one right there, where that's hooked up. Maybe even another one there. And possibly there. There's a lot of spaces that are missing standoffs, but I don't really care. This isn't a museum piece anyway. A couple of tips and tricks for hooking this up. And I've probably done this wrong, so I'm sure that this will result in the magic smoke leaking out, and you can all point and laugh, and actually you won't be, because if there's magic smoke, there probably won't be a video, but anyway. When you're hooking up this AT connector, this AT power connector, for those of you that have never done this before, the grounds touch. It should always be what they call black to black, because this comes in 2 connectors, it's not just one piece. On some machines it is. On some power supplies you do end up with a one piece, and I mean it's kind of hard to hook those up backwards. In theory these have got tabs on them to prevent you from hooking them up backwards, but if you force it, or if those tabs are broken, because let's face it, brittle plastic and all that, you could plug it in both ways and smoke something, and you really don't want to do that. Now the front panel can be a little bit of a pain. I don't know which end of the connections is supposed to be ground. It seems to be different on pretty much all of these. So my assumption is that the inner pin on these is the positive, and also on top of that, the colored wire on the cable is the positive, because that's the standard, that's what it should be. That might not be true, I guess I'm going to find out. For a switch it matters very little, because a switch either makes or breaks. There's no diode or anything in there. For an LED that obviously does. The turbo switch is going to be even more of a problem, because the turbo switch on this case is a 3-wire switch, because you could hook it up in 2 different positions, either normally open or normally closed. And what that will do is that will affect what having the turbo button depressed versus pressed does, whether that engages turbo mode or disengages turbo mode. So, I hope I've got that hooked up correctly. It may or may not be on the correct 2 pins of the 3-pin, because this is obviously a 3-pin connection coming off of the switch, but I've only got a 2-pin header on the board. Most properly designed boards have got a 3-pin header. You can hook it up, and there's really no question as to how it should be hooked up. But on this, now, I've got questions. And then this hard drive LED that's right here is not hooked up because there's no space on the board for it, because back in these days, there was no integrated disk controller. So you would generally hook that up to your disk controller, which I have in this box somewhere. I thought I had in this box somewhere. Here it is. This may or may not work, because this looks kind of messed up. I might be able to fix those contacts, but yeah, I don't know. But there should be a connection on this somewhere, probably on J1, which of course has to be a 4-pin connector, because they can't make this easy. So somewhere on that, I'm sure that it should be hooked up. Somewhere on J1. I guess I can figure that out. Probably to pin 1, would be my guess. Now, video-wise, it came with this card. This is an EGA card. I don't have an EGA monitor, so this is pretty useless to me. I think it might be able to do CGA, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up. It's never safe to assume that. But what I have here, out of something else, is an EGA card. I could not find a VGA card, but the EGA I guess will have to do. But before I go through any of that trouble, I'm going to put this into power and see what happens, because this could all just be a giant waste of time. Okay, here in my crowded testing area. I've got it plugged in. It hasn't smoked yet, but of course there's no power in it. I hear a hissing noise, so it's probably getting ready to blow up, or do something else of a similarly creative nature. I'm hoping that this doesn't emit magic smoke as soon as I turn the power on. Now, I've got no video card installed, I have no I/O card installed, I have no disk controller installed. What this should do is give me a beep code. Now, what beep code you can expect depends on the BIOS that you're running. This system has an AMI BIOS, which you could see until the focus lost the plot. So what I should get for a video problem, if I remember my beep codes correctly, is a set of 8 beeps. Here we go. I get nothing. At all. So that's not a particularly good sign. Probably means that we have a serious problem. I think the news is probably bad for this, and I'll explain why here while I talk about this. Number one, I think I have my connectors backwards. And this is after looking at the key lock connector in there. It's labeled as key lock. That's a 5-pin connection that only goes in one way. Because if you take a look at it, if I go and pull it here, we take a look, you can see there's, now, actually you can't see anything because the camera won't look at it. And now it's out of focus because of course it's out of focus. Come on, you piece of junk. Focus! Hello? Seriously. This is like craziness. It's like high school all over again. You can see there, the key lock connector is the top one here. There's 4 pins connected out of a total possible 5. There is only one way to hook this up, such that it will actually function. And if you look at this, you can see that at least when it comes down to the connection for the lock, the colored wire is to the edge of the board, which would mean that I've got all of these backwards, because that should be your positive. Now, having said that, the interesting thing about this is, on the other end of that connector, these 2 pins here go to your power LED. If you ever wondered why you have a 3-pin power LED connector in a modern computer, that's why. Because it's a holdover from these days when it was part of the key lock connector, which was 5 pins, so you couldn't hook it up wrong. So I'm going to reverse these, but the problem is that because I can only hook this up one way, I know that the power LED is hooked up properly, and I was getting no power LED. Now, it's possible this LED is bad, because that could certainly happen, but it's not likely, which means that I might be back to the drawing board on this one. I'm going to have to do some experimentation. I'm making an assumption here on how this is hooked up. My assumption is, and I don't know which one would be which, this is being the turbo switch. One of those connections, which the camera won't focus on, is normally open, one of them is normally closed. The 2 on the edges is how this normally goes, and the one in the middle is your common connection, or your ground. So again, I'm making the assumption that the green wire, which is the one in the middle, is our ground, but that could actually be wrong. I don't know how this is hooked up. Okay, try again. This is really the only last try that I can make right now with what I've got, because I don't really have anything to really thoroughly test this. I suppose I could install a video card if I really wanted to, but I don't care enough. So I've hooked up all of these connections in the same way, and what I mean by that is the pin housings on them have got a side with no exposed pins and a side with exposed pins. So following the key lock, which you can't hook up backwards even if you tried, well, I mean you could, it just wouldn't work. But that key lock, which we can't really hook up backwards because the pins correspond to the pins no matter what you do. It's a 5-pin connector with the second pin missing, so you can't mess that up. Following that, I have hooked up all these connections in the same way. Now I think that the speaker is hooked up backwards doing it this way because, again, assuming that the colored wire is positive, which may not actually be true, it could go either way, but assuming it is, that is positive, my understanding of the speaker connector is that it's a 4-pin connector with one of the pins missing. The second pin missing. So the second pin is right beside the positive. If that were the case, the way I've got this hooked up, the missing pin is beside the ground. But, again, it may not matter much. Let's see what happens this time. I have power from the power supply, but I have nothing on the front. I have no front panel LEDs. So that tells me, yeah, I have no front panel LEDs. So what that tells me is the board's not even receiving power. So that is going to put the brakes on this. Sorry that it wasn't a more interesting video. I would have liked this thing to actually work, but, well, sometimes you just can't win. This could be any number of things, really. The power supply could be bad still. I don't know. I've never actually checked it to see if everything is okay on it. So that could certainly be a problem. The board could be bad, which is what I'm more likely to inclined to believe. It's not powering on at all, so it really doesn't matter. I get no activity out of the LEDs. I don't think all those LEDs are bad. That'd be kind of strange. And I certainly don't think the turbo switch is bad either. Again, that would be kind of strange for all of those things to be the case. So I think I got a bad board. I think I am going to be looking for another board somewhere. I would like to put a 286 in this because to me, that's what it should have. To my line of thinking, that's what it should have. But I don't know. I suppose I could be persuaded on that. But as far as this is concerned, there will be a part 4. There would have been anyway, because I don't have a monitor around to hook this up to test it properly. So, that's it for that. Stay tuned, I guess, when I'm able to find a board, probably one that's tested working, to throw at this machine. But for now, that's it.